On the 9th of May 2016, a 44-year-old woman by the name of Charity Chidebere Ayedobon disappeared after she went to a bar with her boyfriend in Abuja. Charity was a divorcee. She used to be married to a notable businessman by the name of Mr. David Ayedobon. They were married for 15 years and had 4 children that were already adults as at the time of her disappearance. Charity herself was a well-to-do businesswoman. She was well-to-do. Even in the divorce, it seemed like she also gained a lot. She had businesses with her husband, although it's not clear if as at the time of the divorce she was still in business with her husband. But her alone, she was wealthy and rich. And after the divorce, she moved into an apartment where she began living by herself. This was a new life for Charity Chidebere, a recently divorced woman in her 40s. She was ready to explore life as a newly single woman. And it was said that she was very active on Facebook. It was on Facebook that she met a young man by the name of Paul Eziogo, who claimed to be a website designer. At this time, Charity was trying to start up a website for her business. And so, meeting Paul seemed like the perfect deal. Eventually, from time to time, she would meet up with Paul, discussing how to get her website running. Eventually, she and Paul began an affair. But the problem was, Paul was half her age. Paul was a very young man in his early 20s as at the time. He may have been in his mid-20s. And she was 44, a successful, wealthy, single woman in her 40s, meeting a young, struggling web designer in his 20s. Many people would see this relationship as that of a sugar mommy and a sugar boy kind of relationship. But it didn't matter, at least not to Charity, and clearly not to Paul, because this was beneficial to him for the most part. It is believed that they dated for around a year before she disappeared. And it is also believed that somewhere along the line in the relationship, Charity began getting tired of Paul. In a typical sugar boy and sugar mama relationship, we know who spends the most. But clearly, these kinds of relationships usually don't last past a year. Eventually, it was said that Charity began getting tired of fending for this young man. And he noticed that she was getting done with him. It is also believed that he was requesting too much from her, requesting huge sum of money, and he wasn't getting it all the time. And he began noticing a reduction in the food portion from the hands that was feeding him. Paul Eziogo realizes that he was about to lose this woman, maybe to another sugar boy, maybe to another young man, or maybe she too was going to eventually marry an eligible man at age range, because let's face it, she was not going to go from a rich millionaire husband to a broke 20-year-old web designer on Facebook. Her relationship with Paul was clearly transactional, and Paul soon realizes that this business deal was going to end soon. And that was when he came up with the idea to get the most out of her before she eventually leaves him for someone else. On the 9th of May 2016, Paul took Charity out to a bar to have drinks, chill, and just relax and maybe talk more about their relationship. To Charity, this was just another outing for them. But for Paul, he was trying to make sure that he got her drunk enough to the point she would need someone to take her home. Paul successfully got Charity drunk, so drunk that she lost consciousness of where she was. He eventually took her home, and while he was with her at home, he called another of his friends named Emmanuel. When Emmanuel arrived at the home where Paul and Charity lived, Paul ordered Emmanuel to take Charity to Kubwa, another area entirely, and get rid of her completely. Clearly, Paul was not alone in this. This woman had enough wealth by herself that could go around. And so he decided to get his friends in on the deal. Emmanuel did just what he was told. He picked up Charity, who was still drunk, drove her off to another part of Abuja, where he butchered her into multiple pieces and kept her in 2 different sack bags. He drove another mile to another area in Abuja, in Buari, where he dumped the 2 sack bags in a stream. That was how Charity disappeared from the planet of the earth. With Charity gone, everything she owned was at the mercy of Paul, who then took charge of her vehicles, her finances, and other valuables that belonged to her, including her mobile phones and even having access to her Facebook. 2 days after they had killed and butchered this woman, dismembering her body and disposing of it, A post was made on Charity's Facebook talking about a road trip with a picture of her in a vehicle. So family, friends, and people who knew her saw this post and assumed that she was on a road trip, not knowing that she was dead and her body parts scattered in the stream of Wari in Abuja. It is possible she may have scheduled this post for a future road trip, but that is unlikely because I don't think Facebook at the time could schedule a post. So, investigation believes that Paul was the one who had made this post. At the time of this post still, it was difficult for people to reach her. Remember, she was still most likely in business with her ex-husband, Mr. David, and she had multiple businesses and employees and people who look up to her for instructions and guidance. So for 2 days, they didn't hear from her, only to see this post being made on her Facebook. It became concerning because if you're on a road trip and you can make posts on Facebook, then you can take some calls and give some instructions to people running your business for you. But that was not the case. They still could not reach Charity, and it became alarming. Friends and relatives first went to her apartment, but it was locked from the outside. So I guess this kind of helped with the narrative that she was on a road trip. Her car was also gone, so clearly she could have been on a road trip. But it was still difficult to reach her. What kind of road trip is she going to that she won't take her calls, reply a text or a chat or anything, or even make a call, speak to her children, her husband, her sisters, her managers, people running her businesses? The fact that her apartment was locked and her car was gone was not satisfactory for people who needed to hear from her. It wasn't as though they were worried that something had happened to her. It was just the fact that she had work to do. She is a businesswoman. She had clients, she had customers, she had sales boys, sales girls, she had people she employed that need instructions from her, but they weren't getting it. And this became a problem. Family and friends and people who knew her became concerned and they began suspecting something wasn't right. The police was involved, and then they decided to check her apartment. They forced their way in, broke in through the door, and when they got into her apartment, they realized that her house was intact. Her clothes and bags were not packed. There was even a pot of stew recently cooked in her kitchen. Maybe she cooked it the day before she went to the bar. So this clearly threw the police off, because why would she cook stew, leave it on the pot? She didn't even put it in the fridge, and then she's on a road trip with her clothes and bags not packed. In a separate investigation, a source revealed that days before she went missing, she was afraid for her life. She expressed being fearful. She was scared about something, that she had to call a CCTV camera company to come install CCTV cameras in her apartment. But by the time they came, that was the time she had already gone missing. So the day the installers agreed to install the CCTV camera with her, she was no show. The police even confirmed from these installers that yes, they had an agreement with Charity to come on this day, but when they came on that day, she wasn't around. Even the apartment security man confirmed it, that these CCTV people did come, but Charity was not around. The investigation went through her call logs, through the network provider, but nothing unusual was also found. However, though, it was clear that she made calls to certain numbers, and I think one of those phone numbers belonged to Paul. But at this time, Paul wasn't a person of interest. It wasn't expressed that Paul was someone the police was looking for. It wasn't mentioned. Now, remember, Paul was way younger than her, and their relationship may have only been between them. I don't think it was one she wanted to flaunt around or show off like an actual relationship that could lead to something. So a relationship with her sugar boy was most likely on the down low. Maybe anytime anyone saw her with Paul, they would assume it's the younger brother or a younger relative. So maybe the security man would have seen Paul with her and assumed this was not the boyfriend. However, if they did date for 1 year, I want to believe that she did speak to somebody, a close friend, someone who would have known about her relationship at least. Someone would have known that she was in a love affair or in some sort of entanglement with this kid. Soon afterwards, they knew she was missing and they began making posts about her disappearance on Facebook, hoping anyone who had seen her or knew anything would come up with useful information. The disappearance of Charity Chidebere was a big and popular one on the internet back then in 2016. It was almost as though she was one of the most searched person in Nigeria that year she went missing, because a lot of people were on it. People were looking for this woman. 3 days later, after it was confirmed that she had disappeared, the two sack bags that were dropped in a stream in Buari was found. Some scavengers found it and eventually alerted the public. The police were called and they assessed the bag, realizing that these are body parts that belong to a female. However, they could not identify who the person was. It was so badly mutilated that they couldn't make anything of it. When the news of the butchered body parts found in Buari came out to the public, the police suggested to Charity's family that there's a chance that this could be her. But the family refused to believe that that was Charity. It was impossible for them to handle that could have been Charity. They believed that Charity was still alive. And so they refused to conduct a DNA test, leaving the authorities to quickly bury the remains that were found. It was documented and eventually buried. But on a side note, I don't know why the family would not have agreed to a DNA test. Just do the testing and be sure that that is not Charity. The fact that they did not do it is concerning. I understand that they are hopeful or they believe strongly that Charity is somewhere alive, or maybe they had their reasons. Maybe they saw it and it did not just make sense that this part would be Charity. Many a times, people, especially Charity, who comes from a wealthy home, she comes from a rich family, she married a rich husband. She herself is well-to-do, she is rich. So I guess these rich people never see themselves as pieces of meat, for what it's worth. I guess in their wildest dreams, no matter how low life can get, there would never be that. At this time, when bodies are being found in bags or sack or in the river or in a sack bag, this period of time in 2016, if it came out that a random body was found decapitated, a woman's body was found in a sack bag and thrown in the trash in a burial pit, it's usually associated with girls who do runs. It usually turns out to be prostitutes, sex workers, or just poor random people used for rituals. So whenever headlines or news or a story breaks out that a body cut in pieces was found in the gutters, it ends up being people from lower class. So I would assume that the family of Charity just went to that mentality that, nah, this is not our daughter. That is not it. And it is believed they didn't do a DNA test, or maybe they did and we didn't get to find out. But it was never reported that they agreed to the DNA test. They continued looking for Charity. Days went by, weeks went by, months went by. The police still has no lead. Some people were arrested in connection to the case. I'm assuming neighbors or people who were close to her. But eventually, they still did not have concrete evidence to tie these people to the disappearance of Charity, whom they still think has disappeared. Despite seeing the body, it has not been mentioned that Charity was dead. So the pieces of body have been seen and have been buried, but it has not been concluded that that was Charity. Although words were going around that that could be her. Many people believed it was her. But I guess until the family says so, then it's not so. The story soon took a dark twist when a prominent lawyer in Abuja named Emeka Ngwoye came out and accused Charity's ex-husband, Mr. David, of being the one behind the woman's disappearance. This lawyer made several posts on the internet accusing David, Charity's ex-husband, of being the one who had, made the woman vanish. And this lawyer claimed he had evidence, claimed he had proof. But he was making this post on Facebook. So, the story is viral, the story is popular, everyone is talking about it, which kind of makes it a nest for people to chase clout with, or make it about themselves. And I think such is the case of this lawyer. And this kind of drew their attention to Charity's ex-husband, which, when you look at it, it kind of does look like an accusation that would hold a little bit of water. For most cases, wives disappearing, husbands disappearing, spouses are usually the first suspects. And given that she was divorced from her husband, David, it is almost nearly believable. If somebody had come out with that accusation, it kind of looks like there's a lot of reason why this could have been the case. Maybe they had a dispute, maybe they had a fight. Most divorces are usually messy and bloody and, filled with hate and urge for vengeance. Maybe that was the case. Remember, she also came out of the divorce a very wealthy woman. Maybe that could be one of the reasons too that would make someone believe that her ex-husband would kill her. But David had to prove his innocence because this accusation was really, really affecting him. A lot of people will start looking at him. Families of Charity will look at him. His own children will look at him. And so this wasn't looking good for David at all. This accusation was damning. And when this accusation would come out, everybody would start to put one or two. Oh, yeah, you guys had a fight because of this thing. Oh, you guys had an issue because of this thing. Oh, you guys had this disagreement. Oh, maybe you were jealous because she was moving on to a younger guy. And all of these things would make sense. It will hold a lot of water. Like if somebody had literally come out to pin this murder or this Charity's disappearance on Mr. David, they would have a good argument based off of what they can gather from families and friends who knew the couple when they were married. It's easy to accuse a spouse of the death of their partner. It's very easy. And that was why when this lawyer came out on Facebook to make this accusation, it brought the story back to life. And everybody was like, wait a damn minute, that's true. At this time still, nobody has even brought up the topic of Paul. Nobody has brought up the topic of the sugar boy. And that is why I feel like maybe a relationship with Paul wasn't so public. Not many people knew Paul existed. It is a common trope, it's a common theory that Abuja is filled with older women who have money who go for younger men. Abuja sugar mummies is a very popular thing. It has been in existence for a long time. So if you're looking for a good sugar mommy, you go to Abuja. We've heard that so many times. But then these women don't exactly make their relationship with their boy toys popular because, again, these are boy toys. She probably had other boy toys. This was just a woman who is just done with a marriage, starting a new life. So she was probably looking to have some fun, and she probably found Paul young and attractive and broke. Just the perfect recipe for her to control him with the money and keep him around till whenever she gets tired, and then she discards him and move on to the next. So it's surprising that nobody was thinking towards that side. Not many people knew Paul existed. And that was why it was easy for the world to turn on her husband, Mr. David Ayedobon. David responded to these allegations by suing this lawyer for 10 million naira because that accusation was fire. He defended himself and claimed that he had no hands in the disappearance of his ex-wife. He was probably moving on himself too. And I also forgot to add that Charity and David also had an ongoing case in court regarding properties and probably custody of the children. So that alone too was what fueled the recipe or the fire of that accusation that Mr. David had a hand in her disappearance. I mean, that alone is enough to just crucify this man. The disappearance of Charity Chidebere was one case that we thought was probably just going to vanish. At some point, it went off the air. People, you know how the Nigerian social media is. Somebody new is going to get murdered, something big is going to happen, and everybody will move on. And that was almost the case for Charity, as she had not been found, and the family were still looking for her. The police are having new cases on their desks every now and then, so they too were moving on. But David, the husband of Charity, did not stop.
And since then, I worked relentlessly with the FCT Police Command to ensure that we get to the bottom of the case.
It's possible that the family of Charity and David themselves did not stop. And that is a good thing with having families who are financially capable to push a case of a loved one to the distance. And that was what they did. In as much as the case died down on the internet, the family continued putting pressure on the police. They did everything they could. They were searching for her vehicle, which was still missing. They had their suspect, Paul. Eventually, they were able to figure out that she had a sugar boy, but they didn't make it public. They were trying to trail the number that they saw on the call log. All those little details or all those little things they could pick, they kept it on a secret, and the police continued a very heavy secret underground investigation for 2 years. 2 years they were tracking Paul, trying to find the best way they could hold him without, tipping him off. Now, it's not clear how the police were able to do this. They may have traced Charity's vehicle to Enugu, where they found the new driver who gave the information to how he got the vehicle. Eventually, they were able to trace the buyers and the distributor to someone in Benin who turned out to be Paul. Paul was arrested in Benin City in 2018. Paul then led the police to Emmanuel, who also was picked up and arrested. Charity's vehicle was recovered in Enugu, and other of her valuables that were believed to have been stolen by Paul were also recovered. It was then that the police were able to come out with the culprits who had a hand in the disappearance of Charity. Paul eventually did confess to the crime. He told the police that he had planned to rob and kill Charity 2 days before the actual incident.
Many of them? Two. And we have plans for it already.
For how long have you been planning? Sorry.
Just 2 days.
Just 2 days.
Yeah.
That he wanted to do it himself, but he thought doing it himself was going to be tricky. And so he called his friend Emmanuel. And another suspect who we don't know what role that one played, but there were about 3 of them eventually who were arrested into the disappearance and murder of Charity Chidebere. It was then officially concluded that the body that they had seen back in 2016 was that of Charity. That is, the body they had seen mutilated and cut into pieces in a sack bag, because it fits the description on the method in which these boys killed her. When it was eventually publicized to the public that the killers of Charity had been found, Mr. David went after that lawyer who had accused him on Facebook again, and I think this was the point he pressed the lawsuit on the 10 million naira lawsuit. But we are not sure how far that case had gone. I'm just going to assume that maybe David was more happy that his name has been cleared, because let's face it, everybody was going to be looking at him with one eye the whole time. Another thing that we still are not sure of is if the family of Charity eventually accepted that the body found in Buari stream was that of their loved one, Charity Chidebere. If they did, they may have had it exhumed and given her a proper burial. But it's possible that they did not. But we don't know what happened eventually. It's such an unfortunate story. One of those stories that would make you want to think twice about the people you keep around you. Charity was a young woman, for what is worth, just looking to start a life. And she had an affair with this young boy who seemed harmless, who seemed nice, who seemed sweet, but had the heart of the devil. And that is the thing. She probably didn't see it coming. And even the threat that she got about the CCTV footage, I am believing that she had a problem with Paul. I am also saying that she probably wanted to end things. That was why she wanted a CCTV camera. Remember, she was asking for CCTV camera in her house before she went on to the bar with Paul. And I think that meeting with Paul was a different meeting entirely. I feel like she had broken up with this boy, and she would not let this boy back home. Because if Paul says that he planned to kill her 2 days before that whole thing happened, it means that Paul had lost access to her. So he could not go on with his own plan to kill her personally in her own home, because she has probably told the security man, don't let him in. She has started looking for a way to get a CCTV camera installed in her apartment, which shows that she was already security conscious about something or someone. And I think it was that boy. And maybe in the sugar boy trope that we know, he invited her to get drinks, to apologize, to, get back in her life so that her guards can open again. And eventually he got her drunk enough so that he can drive her home to the place where he no longer have access to. But obviously, if the security man sees that, oh, you're carrying madam into the house, he's going to let you. and then had his friend take her somewhere else and have her killed and mutilated. I just feel that that could have been the case. She let her guard down to let the boy who she has almost gotten away from. But the thing is, no matter what she had done, I think this boy was relentless. He was still going to find a way to kill her regardless of what it was. It's just unfortunate. There's a chance he's never going to get out of jail. He's most likely going to see life imprisonment, or he would most likely be sentenced to death. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notification button so whenever there is an update, you'll be the first to get notified.